Hi, this is Fish and welcome to Fish Picks. So you've been into locksport for a couple of weeks and you can now open the acrylic lock that came with your first set relatively easily. But where do you go from here? Well, to an extent, this will be determined by how badly bitten by the bug you are and what kind of a budget you have to play with. For now, let's assume this is becoming a hobby you'd like to commit time and resources to, but that your bank account isn't bottomless, and so you're looking for a cost-effective but sound series of investments that will help you grow over the coming weeks and months. What I'd like to share with you here is the approach I've taken to shaping a progressive locksport practice session, and while I'm still very much a newcomer myself, I found this has worked well for me so far. First, I bought a couple of repinnable cutaway locks. This one is from Sparrows, and these are both from a UK company called Cutaway. These will help you understand how different pick profiles interact with your key and driver pin stack. Too often in the beginning I found I was oversetting pins because my technique wasn't dialed in, or I was using a pick that wasn't suited to the bitting and keyway I was working with. Using these locks, I can see in real time how my movements are affecting the pins. They also help me to appreciate the way tensioning makes a difference to early success. The reason I suggest getting repinnable cutaways is because you can repin the lock to mimic a particular bitting pattern that you're finding challenging, such as a low-high-low or high-low-high profile, which can be notoriously tricky. I also picked up the Sparrows progressive lock set. This set consists of 4 lock bodies, the first populated by just 2 standard pins, and then 3 pins, 4 pins, and 5 pins respectively. I still use the last 3 in the set as part of my warm-up for a picking session as a way of calibrating my sensitivity for feedback before moving on to real-world locks. I have, however, repinned the number 2 lock with security pins, and I suspect I'll do something similar with the rest of the set in due course. Now, if you want to do that, it will require that you also get hold of the Sparrows repinning set, but to be honest, it's an excellent value for money investment and provides a cost-effective way of getting into gutting and pinning locks. The set comes with a number of different key profiles and an array of standard and security pins, plus the end cap remover and follower tool. I should say at this point that while I really like the Sparrows range, I'm not affiliated to the company in any way, although I like them even more since in my last order I got one of their beautiful challenge coins. I think there is value, though, in having a number of products from the same company because they play so nicely together. All of these, for example, use the Schlage keyway and hold the same kinds of pins and springs, which has meant that I've been able to mix and match when building new lock challenges for myself. The Revolver, for example, is my go-to on-the-road picking lock. You can tell from the aesthetics that this is also part of the Sparrows range and consists of 4 chambers, each of which can accommodate up to 6 pins with easy access to the Bible through a series of grub screws. It comes pinned with 5 standards in the first chamber, and then each of the remaining 3 alternate with standard spools and pins, serrated, and mushroom pins respectively. This set also comes with spare security pins and a 6-pin key in case you want to populate the empty final space in each chamber. So you can see how each of the tools I've mentioned complements the others. In fact, you could probably just pick up the Revolver instead of buying the progressive lock set and then repin it with 2, 3, 4, and 5 standard pins, and you'd be good to go. The downside of having a number of training locks from the same company is that you might become too familiar with just one kind of feedback and one kind of keyway, which won't prepare you for the array of different kinds of locks you'll be coming across. So with this in mind, I also invested in a few different models of training lock from other companies. This is the Ultimate Practice Lock from learnlockpicking.com. It too has grub screws for ease of access to the Bible and comes with a whole bunch of different pins, so as your skill grows, the lock can provide you with a growing challenge. Again, with the benefit of hindsight, I should probably have bought the 6-pin Ultimate Challenge lock or the 7-pin Ultimate adversary lock in the same range. While slightly more expensive, they would have offered even more options for the future. These kind of tools are an investment because the upfront cost is significant for most people. I'm a school teacher by day, and so each purchase I make has to be quite carefully considered. But I do think that these training aids provide long-term value. Of course, if you have the machining skills, you can always make your own training locks, and the two I have here are homebrew locks that were significantly cheaper. I picked these up on eBay, and they really just involve milling out the top of the Bible using a tool like this, and then putting grub screws in place. So my progressive picking sessions start with a warm-up using one or more training locks, and then I transition to picking a few real-world locks. If I get stuck on a particular bitting profile, I might move back to one of the cutaways, pin it up using a similar profile and see if I can figure out what's going on. Then I'll return to the lock in question and see if that troubleshooting has helped. In terms of which real-world locks to start with, well, that's a topic far wider ranging than I can tackle in this video, but I'd like to offer a few observations that might help. As a UK-based picker, I found it challenging to get hold of some of the more popular starting locks recommended by the international lock sport community. The Brinks range and the American locks, for example, usually involve postage and import duties that can double or treble the costs involved, and so I'd say you really need to shop around to see what you can find locally. Tap into lock sport forums and groups in your country and see what they'd recommend. I've also found that lock sporters can be incredibly generous in sharing their locks around. Many just ask for postage to be covered, so there's a kind of informal lending library in operation. And then there's the creation and sharing of challenge locks, which is a whole different rabbit hole, but that's so far beyond my reach at the moment that I can only watch on in admiration of the machining and picking skills involved. For beginners and mere mortals like me, eBay can be a good source of second-hand locks, but be a little discriminating in your choices. Job lots of Euro cylinders might contain a few gems within reach of the newcomer, but many have old, faulty mechanisms. They may come without a key and can have tricky keyways and security pins, which means that many of them are likely to be consigned to your naughty bucket after hours of frustration without knowing why you failed to get an open. Having made that mistake myself, I now try to focus on buying specific makes and models that I've researched, and I refer to the subreddit belt ranking system as a cross-reference source to get a sense of how challenging a lock is likely to be. In episode number 1 of this channel, I identified 8 elements which determine how difficult a lock might be to pick. So any lock ranking system isn't definitive, but it's certainly a good starting point. Currently, I like to pick a few confidence boosters, such as some of the cheaper Master Lock series, including the Master Lock 140, the Master Lock 40mm, the infamous number 3, and the Master Lock number 5. I also enjoy picking the Smith & Lock 50mm laminated lock, and all of these I've bought in hardware stores in my area, and all of them can be easily raked and single pin picked. Then I move on to one of the locks that's a stretch for my current standard, the Master Lock 140 lockout tagout, the Master Lock 570, or the ABUS 7240. And then I use the remainder of the session to chip away at whatever my current project lock is, in my case, the American 1100, which I haven't yet been able to open. A session shaped like this takes 45 minutes to an hour, which is long enough to dial in my sensitivity to feedback and refine my technique, but not so long as to cause hand fatigue or prove impractical to fit into my schedule. I try not to have any other distractions around me when I'm picking, and I often have a specific skill set that I'm looking to develop, such as hybrid raking and single pin picking or top of keyway tensioning. So there you have it. That's how I've transitioned away from my first acrylic locks to what I'm picking now. I'm still only a couple of months into my lock sport journey, and I'm sure I'll look back on this in a year or so and critique some of the advice given here, but I hope you found something useful for your own practice. Thanks for joining me today, and I wish you every success moving forwards.